Christiana, thank you so much for being with us today on the Newsmaker.
No, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted.
Wonderful. You are no stranger to Switzerland. You've come here, I mean, countless number of times, right? What is...
More than a Swiss clock can count.
Not bad, not bad. So you are also signing up for the red passport sometime soon.
Well, yeah, probably.
Tell me what is, do you feel at home when you're in Switzerland?
That's a good question. I actually would answer by saying, I feel at home anywhere. And I know that that's very strange, but I literally, when I walk in today, I walked into this hotel. I had only been here 10 minutes. I got a call from my office who said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm home already." So I am like a little snail. I carry home with me. And
well, you're so multicultural, you know, you're
I am multicultural, but I also just so much delight in wherever I am. So I don't pine anywhere for anything that has happened in the past. I don't pine for being in some other place or living in some other place where I've lived in the past. I just am very much in the here and now.
Lovely. And you're, of course, originally from Costa Rica.
Indeed.
For those in the room that don't know this, which is oftentimes referred to as the Switzerland of Central America.
Yes.
Which is also a bit where this question came from, in the sense of that connection and that level of sustainability that occurs in both places. If, you know, you land in Switzerland, you're like, oh, they get it here.
Yes. Well, you know, I think the expression of the Switzerland of Central America to refer to Costa Rica is even prior to our journey on sustainability, and I think also prior to Switzerland's journey. I think it has to do, first of all, with the prevalence of mountains that we also have. It has to do with the love of nature that both people have. It has to do with the tradition of peace and neutrality that both nations have, although Switzerland has the type of army that it does. It's a very particular type of army. We don't have an army at all, other than the army of red macaws, ants, turtles that we have, which are our armies. And so I think it goes beyond. I would say sustainability is sort of another layer on the similarity between the two countries, aside from the fact that we also take a pride in small is beautiful, just like Switzerland does as well. So there are many things that bring us together.
When I was researching and preparing for this interview and looking at your background, I mean, I thought, wow, I mean, the list is endless of the amount of things that you've done, and recognitions on not only, but also steps, and just such an incredible background. And my question was just, how do you change the world? How do you change the world and still have your own life?
Oh, that's actually a challenge.
Wow, like how do you do, what is the method to the madness?
Yeah, well, I do have ownership over days that are somewhere between 27 and 30 hours per day. And that's actually quite fantastic. I do tend to pack myself in quite a bit. But you know, I had a grandfather who passed away when he was 105. And I learned a lot from him.
So good genes.
Good genes. And he always said, please don't tell me that you're sleeping now. You can sleep after you pass on. Right now, sleeping is a waste of time. So that was his attitude, you know, just take advantage of every minute that we have to do everything that we can and must do. So I guess I have it in my genes. I inherited certainly from my grandfather, from both of my parents. So I think it runs pretty thick in the blood. And I think of all of us, all our siblings, we're all
How many are you?
There's 6 of us.
Okay, big family.
Yeah. So it's a little, you know, full throttle family.
And again, for those that don't in the room that don't know, you come from a political dynasty.
I do.
So you do come from a line of, starting with your grandfather, but then also your father, who was president of Costa Rica.
Yes, my father was president of Costa Rica. In fact, I thank my father, and all Costa Ricans thank my father for the fact that we don't have an army, because it was he who outlawed the army in 1948.
I was going to say it, but
Yeah, so we thank him every day for that. And then I have a brother who was also president of Costa Rica after my father passed on, so my father never knew that. And that brother used to live in Switzerland because he was associated with the World Economic Forum.
Look at that.
Yeah.
So so you have even a family connection.
Indeed.
To Switzerland.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's where that comes. Now we've got that sorted out. Well, you have daughters of your own. So are they also like you? I mean, do you pass on also these things to them?
Well, yes, they're also full throttle all the time. In fact, I have no idea how they pack so many things into their lives.
You have no idea, really? I think we have a good idea.
Maybe they learned, but I think they're even more packed and more intense than I am, if that is even possible. But I just totally delight in that. I delight in, and I'm very proud and grateful for my daughters, because they are definitely as committed as their predecessors in the family, committed to common good, to service, to ensuring that we have a better quality of life for everyone on the planet. And so that makes me very proud.
And just by example, or did you sit down and talk? I have daughters, so I'm asking this out of personal interest. Did you sit down and talk to them about this, or did you just lead by example?
I think I led by example. I don't remember ever saying thou shalt have a profession that is in service of the common good. I don't remember ever saying that, and if I did, I have forgotten it very conveniently. I just think it was the ambiance in which they grew up. It was the values and principles with which we educated them. But fundamentally, it's just because of who they are. And we know that every individual is the combination of both nature and nurture. And so they just brought, fantastic already their own beautiful attributes to this world. And then let's say I just maybe fertilized those.
And they must be crazy proud of you.
They are. We make a wonderful threesome.
I mean, not everyone can say that their mother is the mother of the Paris Climate Agreement.
I know.
Not everybody can say this.
And honestly, it sometimes puts them in a little bit of an awkward situation, because they are in some public place and someone speaks about the Paris Agreement and my role there, and they first keep very quiet, and then eventually the conversation comes around and he goes, oh, that's my mother, and it puts them in a little bit of an awkward situation, but also I think moves them in the right direction, right? I think they are definitely very understanding of the fact that they are my priority number one, and then my profession, but that these two things actually for me coincide. They are personally, they're my priority number one, but they're also my priority number one because they represent all future generations for me. So they are personally, but also professionally, my priority number one. And so that's actually quite a privilege to be able to work both, to come back to your first question, work both on my personal life with my daughters, but also on my professional life, which some people think I'm working for the planet. I'm not. I'm working for future generations. So it's coincidental, and I'm very privileged to be able to bring both things together.
And what is it like to be at the heart of this conversation about climate change?
It's actually humbling. It's humbling because you realize that every one of us alive right now is just a tiny little link in a long history of humanity. And that what we're experiencing today, we have come to because of all of our ancestral roots and because of everything that has happened before. And you also realize that the future, to a huge extent, depends on the decisions that we're taking today. So it's quite exciting to understand that we have that privilege to be able to take intentional, conscious decisions that are really determining the quality of life for future generations. And that because we are in the Anthropocene geological era, in which for the first time humans are really determining the future, we have that opportunity and that responsibility, and that it is both.
Are you ever frustrated when you encounter people that don't seem to coincide with this feeling of responsibility that you're describing?
Yes, frustrated, I think, is the right word. Some people ask me if I get angry. I don't get angry. It's just frustrating to me that that we're being given such a golden opportunity on a golden platter, and frustrating to see that some people are really haven't opened up their eyes to that. But that's okay. You know, I don't lose time with people who tell me they don't understand climate change, they don't think it's happening, they don't want to do anything about it. It's like, okay, well, bless you. The rest of us are actually going to work on this. Because the thing is, we don't need 100% participation in any transformational change. The fact is, when you look back at any transformational change that we have done, whether it is finally getting over institutionalized slavery or finally getting over ingrained racism or sexual reproduction or sexual preferences, you see that you don't need 100% of people with you. You do need a critical mass. And what is important is to work with that critical mass to the point where they can make a difference. And then there'll always be some laggards that are there, but I don't actually waste my time with those.
But would you describe someone like President Trump a laggard? I mean, he's a world leader. I mean,
yes,
him pulling out, having the U.S. pull out of
let me say,
climate
the
accord
office that he occupies is an office of leadership. That is not what we're seeing from him. His office is one of leadership, and that makes me sad. That makes me very sad to see that that office is not being used for that for which it was created. And that's very sad. That's sad for the U.S. economy. It is sad for the world. But it's not going to last forever. So to answer your question, no, I do not waste my time thinking about what Mr. Trump is going to say or do about climate change.
So in that moment when you knew he had pulled out of the Paris Agreement, were you just like,
Yeah, I was very sad, truly, because I actually remember the moment I knew that he was going to make the speech. I knew what the conclusion of the speech was going to be, but I was actually hoping for some integrity in the speech, even if his conclusion was a different conclusion to mine, because the way I like to work with people is to really understand where they're coming from and really work with them, even if we reach different conclusions. But I sat there with a little piece of paper and a pen, very primitively, saying, right, every time that he makes a statement that is factually correct, I'm going to write it down because then I can work with that statement. Well, I ended the speech with a blank piece of paper. And I thought, that is really sad when the President of the United States has been so erroneously briefed that there is not one statement that he can make about climate change or about Paris Agreement that is factually correct, independently of what your opinion is about things. But factually, not one was correct. So that's very sad. And unfortunately, we have seen quite a few measures that have come since then. But we've also seen that, that his positions on climate change have actually erupted in a lot of very good action.
well, especially the subnational level, right?
Just within the United States, you now have 12 to 13 or maybe even 14 states. You have 300 cities, you have 1,000 corporations, many universities, colleges, little villages that have actually said, well, we're still in because we have started the decarbonization process and we know that it's good for us. So we're going to continue. That is almost 50% of the GDP of the United States and growing. And that's just the United States. The fact is that 24 hours before he came out to say that he was intending to pull out of the Paris Agreement, China and the European Union, already assuming that he was going to pull out, he already then said, we're not pulling out. No matter what he says, we're still there. Why? Because the European Union and China and many countries after that have the experience of working on climate change and understanding that it creates jobs, that it brings energy security, that it is actually much better for our health, particularly in cities, because it leads to less pollution.
Right.
And so
China
they're all
specifically.
there. It's China specifically, India not far behind. And so they're all doing this because they understand that this is good for their own economy and good for their own citizens. So, would we have had this incredible momentum on climate without him pulling out? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe the momentum is actually precisely to prove that there are many benefits.
Are we at a point now where technology is caught up, economics is catching up, they're becoming the new drivers, it seems,
Absolutely.
of climate change? Is policy going to become irrelevant somehow?
I don't think policy will ever be irrelevant, but I do think that we see a tag team situation in which sometimes policy is ahead and then the market catches up and goes forward, and then policy has to catch up and go forward. So I think the fact that we have the Paris Agreement, which has now been ratified, that means made national law in 175 countries, most of them after Mr. Trump's announcement. So 176 countries and counting already have made that the legal framework in their countries. Now we have the market certainly catching up because, as you say, we have technologies that are dropping in price. Certainly solar has come down at least 80% in the past 8 to 9 years. Wind is catching up there as well. We have other technologies. We have investments into storage technologies that are also beginning to drop the price of that, et cetera, et cetera. So the good technologies, the technologies that are the solution technologies, are becoming much more competitive. And finance is actually moving also. So yesterday we just had FTSE Russell announce that $54 trillion
yes. The green
are
economy.
already in the green economy, which is 60% of financial markets, more or less the equivalent of fossil fuel. Had you asked me whether we would be at a parity in financial markets just even 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, yeah, but we'll have to wait much longer. The fact is that because we have policy, we have technology, and we have and we have finance moving in tandem with each other, we now have an exponential, not a progressive, linear, gradual, an exponential increased capacity to address climate change, and that's what we should have. Because frankly, we're running out of time.
Are we going to make
the agreement? So I think we have to squeeze ourselves through one very narrow door that we have first, even before we get to the ultimate objective of the agreement, which will be in a couple of decades. But first, we have to squeeze our way through 2020, and that is the most urgent milestone that we have, because by 2020, science has now been very clear, and this is science that has come out after the Paris Agreement, that by 2020 we have to have put ourselves in the position of being able to reverse the trend that we're currently on of increasing emissions. We have to be able to plateau and begin the descent of emissions by 2020. That's only 2 years from now. So everything that we're seeing is very good. We're walking in that direction. The question is, are we actually going to make it in time? Because every decision that we take, every single decision that is being taken today, particularly on investment in technologies and infrastructure, has a lock-in effect that locks us in to the corresponding greenhouse gas emissions of that infrastructure for 20, 30, 40 years. That's why the turning point in 2020 is absolutely critical.
And who is taking the lead now? Now that the
Everyone.
U.S. has pulled out? Everyone? It's not just
Everyone.
China, for example?
China is definitely taking a lead, and they're doing it for their own self-interest. That's the important thing to remember. They're doing it out of their air pollution concerns. They're doing it out of their competitive concerns because they know that we are moving toward a decarbonized global economy, and they want to be competitive. They want to have reached maturity in the technologies that are going to be in demand. So they're reaching maturity in solar, they're reaching maturity in wind. They are installing 9 mega factories of lithium batteries. They want to be mature in that market. They want to, honestly, they want to monopolize the markets of these clean technologies. That's their aspiration, because they know those are going to be the technologies that are going to be in demand.
Now, you were also recently in London. You participated in Under the Eye, it's Women in Climate Change Summit. And, traditionally, not a lot of women have been at the table when talking climate change. Do you find that this is changing? Is the role of women changing? I mean, obviously you're an exception, and now you've named also Patricia Espinosa has taken over at the UN. Do you find that the conversation is changing around women? Or
over the 6 years that I was...
Because you were looking at me very serious. I couldn't tell what you were thinking.
Yeah, well, because I was going through the list of all the women, actually. So over the 6 years in which I was at the helm of the climate negotiations on behalf of the United Nations, I actually saw the increase of women. Literally, I saw it, right? Because I was sitting in the podium and I had the entire negotiating space in front of me. And I could see more and more women come into that. I could see them come in as negotiators, working on the text. I could see them coming in from the NGOs, from the finance community, from the spiritual community, from the science community. I could see them coming in from many, many different communities. Are we where we should be at 50-50? No. And the reason why that is important to continue to pursue that is because it is important to have a different perspective on things, a different view, in addition to the fact that women are disproportionately affected negatively by climate change, and we can actually disproportionately create solutions. So for all of these reasons, it is very important to continue on that path.
Given your background with your family, are there any plans for you to return to Costa Rica and run for office?
No. I am also...
Madam President?
I'm also asked that quite often. I think there are enough Figuereses who have been in the public office in Costa Rica, both male and female Figuereses. My sister was also there. So I think the country is well served with those Figuereses. I now have a niece who's a newly named Minister of Commerce. So I think that part of the family is doing a great job.
So just to finish up, it is time for question out of a hat.
Question out of a hat. Okay,
There it
I've
is.
been accused actually of speaking out of my hat. I've been accused in Australia of doing that.
Of doing that.
This is the first time I'm picking a question out of a hat. I just picked one.
You just pick one.
Anyone.
Anyone you want.
Okay, there are
Anyone you
about
want.
10 in here.
Yes.
Oh, how fun. Okay. And now is there something written?
Yes.
Are you useful in a crisis? What a fun question. I think I'm useful in a crisis because I tend to become very calm and very quiet. And I think that's a good thing in a crisis. So I tend to go into overdrive in here, but underdrive here. And that has actually served me well. It has served me very well in the past.
I think so. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being with us, Christiana.
Thank you
It was
very
wonderful.
much, Ana Maria. Wonderful.